Dare we say there are two, and only two types of people here in mid-November. There are those who are listening to holiday music in their cars right now, and those who are not. I'm hoping, in the interest of preserving the sanctity of the holiday season, that you are indeed listening to this edition of Cardinals Underground, brought to you by Pacific Office Automation. But there was a spirited debate on Friday night when we were going to dinner between yours truly and my wife about whether it was appropriate and fitting or not to listen to holiday music this time of year when we're still a week or so removed from Thanksgiving. Dani, Sureck, and Darren Urban, weigh in, please.
Well, here's my follow-up question before I answer. What does your wife think? What was her reasoning?
She started listening to holiday music in October. So,
well, then I would
yes.
say she's right.
That's right.
Come on, Paul.
That's good advice. Let me write that down again. You're right. If I haven't learned that already,
My wife is watching the Christmas in July Hallmark movies, so there's that. It's funny you bring that up because 2 weeks ago when we were in Cleveland, I was in a group text with it's myself, Craig Grelu, and the great Dave Burns of Arizona Sports, and we were talking about what we were doing that weekend, and out of the blue, Craig Grelu, which 2 weekends ago was what? Was that the first weekend in November?
It's Halloween.
Craig Grelu sends us a picture of his Christmas tree. Not done up yet, but it was up in his house. And then this weekend, Craig Grelu texts us the picture of the completed Christmas tree. So I don't know if he's listening to the holiday music, but he's already got his Christmas tree up.
I don't have a problem with that. Of decorating the house a little early in November. I know a lot of people, you got to wait through Thanksgiving, which I understand. And I understand maybe the full-fledged, the holiday music or the movies or, going to see lights and all that waiting until after Thanksgiving. But I feel like if it brings you a little more joy and you want to put that Christmas tree up a little early, then...
I'm sorry. Until there's snow on the ground, we're not doing it.
You tell him, Darren.
I'm throwing the flag on Craig Grelu. That makes it an even dozen from this past week. That's how many penalty flags there were. All right, here we go. By the way,
not on Craig Grelu. You just mean adding the Cardinals total.
Look, we all try and explain the game of football to Craig Grelu and marketing concepts. And so what I said to Gree was, if only the NFL could take that number 1 on the jersey of Kyler Murray and just go ahead and replace it with a lightning bolt. How cool would that be? If every team can use the number 0, what if every player could actually have a lightning bolt? Every team could have one player with a lightning bolt on their jersey. Would you be in favor of that?
The Chargers probably wouldn't be.
That feels a little arena bowl to me.
It could be. You're right. A copyright infringement. The
Probably.
LA Chargers. That could be.
I don't think I like that idea.
Paul not thinking further enough ahead there.
All right, we'll go back to the drawing board. Calvisi
Litigation
consulting on
coming.
that one. All right. So there were two types of players on the Cardinals sideline. Maybe we just start this all over again, and I'll start it like this. Two types of players on the Cardinals sideline for the debut of Kyler Murray. Those who knew and those who found out what it's like to watch Kyler Murray in a regular season game, what it's like to play with Kyler Murray, and what he does for a team. And as you saw in the Sights and Sounds video on azcardinals.com and the social media platforms, really well done, by the way. Behind the scenes, all access. You thought you saw the game until you watched the Sights and Sounds, which took you inside the game. And there was that moment where Jalen Thompson was telling young Starling Thomas, the undrafted rookie free agent, see, I told you, he's something serious. And there was sort of an air of discovery by a lot of players in that sideline who had never experienced Kyler, the football player, the playmaker that he is out on that field.
And that was after the scramble on third down. How many yards did Kyler cover? Like 70?
68.9, Dani.
Yeah.
According to next
we'll
gen
go
stats.
with 70.
Okay. Rounding up there.
That's what the play. And DJ Humphries talked about this a week or two ago when Kyler was practicing. Which offensive lineman did he say in practice was like amazed at a throw that Kyler made?
It was Tristan Colon.
Yes, and DJ had to look at him and say, "Oh, I forgot. You don't know what Kyler can do. Yeah, that's on the reg. That happens all the time."
What impressed you the most, Darren? Honestly, what impressed you the most about Kyler Murray engineering a victory, his first game in 11 months to the day? Because there's a lot of different angles you could go. You could go Kyler in the new scheme. Kyler, how did he look athletically? Kyler, how did he look just comfort level? Yeah, I mean, there's so many different areas that you could point to. Where do you start?
I mean, I can't remember if we talked about it on this podcast last week or where I said it. I know I talked about it before, but ultimately, in the end, it was how he basically looked like he did before the injury. I mean, I I had no discernible difference to my eye from the guy that I watched for 3.5 seasons plus before he got hurt, and then what we saw Sunday. I saw the same exact player, whether he was running, whether he was throwing, whether it was his decision-making. I mean, it'll get better, obviously, as he goes, but when Tyrann Mathieu came back, he was a shell of himself, and both times when he came back at first. He eventually got better, but he was a shell of himself. Dennis Gardeck struggled when he first came back. I didn't see any of that. And the fact that, and this has been noted by multiple people, the fact that key scramble, the 70-yard scramble that netted them 13 yards in the key first down, to have him basically cover the same turf in which he got hurt and to have it end completely differently, obviously one where he's tearing ACL and going down, the other one where he's going down himself, but then jumping up and dramatically signaling first down, I think was quite an exclamation point on this comeback.
It was amazing down on the sideline. So he takes the snap, and then he disappears from view down on the sideline because he was at an angle the far side of the field.
And you can't see very much over people, right?
Uncalled for.
Always.
Even the slim chances where there isn't an offensive lineman standing in front of me, you still can't see. It's so far down. Now he emerges back into view, and you're like, oh, my goodness, he's 30 yards behind the line of scrimmage when he reemerged.
No bueno.
And then all of a sudden, here he comes. And it was quintessential Kyler, just creating. Look, there's stuff you can scheme up, and then there's stuff you just can't teach. And there's the performance in the moment that's completely organic, and that's what separates Kyler in so many ways. His day started, he was one of the first guys out in that field to go 3 hours before kickoff with Buddy Morris. And they're out there stretching, doing this whole battery of stretching exercises. And at that point, you realize everything and everyone who has contributed and has gone into the whole process. Because to your point, you could take game film from that game versus 2 years ago, and you'd be hard-pressed if you took the date off it to tell the difference. And that, to me, was remarkable. I did not expect that level of athleticism from Kyler.
I just want to say real quick, we're recording this on a Tuesday, which is the players' off day. Now, still on Tuesdays, a lot of players still come in. If you have to get treatment, you come in. The practice squad players are doing workouts. If you didn't play a lot, you'll work out. And some other guys just come in to use the cold tub or whatever. I went down. I had to go down in the locker room area at one point, and who's down there with Buddy Morris doing? They have like down part of where the weight room is. They have a bunch of hurdles real close, and you know how the players do kind of that side hurdle thing with one leg over, and they do like a handful of them. And Kyler was down there working on that knee on his off day, and again, this is still a process. He's still going through that, but when people want to talk about what's been different, I don't know if he would have done that anyways, but I know this. I don't recall Kyler coming in on off days very often in the past, and all of a sudden you see him down there working very diligently to continue to get better, even though he's already healthy.
It's one thing to come back and look at the way he was using his legs, coming off an ACL injury. And I think it's another to give him the praise that the other parts of his game did not fall off. There are throws, that deep throw to Hollywood Brown, but that was so close. And that's just going to take time and reps and getting more comfortable. But the accuracy was still there. The zip, I know his first pass was incomplete, but watching that, I thought, whoa, that is something that this offense has been missing. Not a knock on Clayton Tune or Josh Dobbs. It isn't the way that Kyler throws the ball. And so it's impressive when you're talking about the command he had in the huddle. Isn't used to going in the huddle as much. He was under center 8 or 9 times, which again is new to him. He looked comfortable in that aspect as well. And the way that he was able to integrate all of his receivers. I mean, has there really been a game where you have seen such an active Hollywood Brown, Rondale Moore, Michael Wilson, and James Conner? I couldn't think of having them all be as active as they were in one game this season. So while it is impressive when you're talking about trusting that knee and scrambling and being able, from our eye, running the way he used to, I do think it was impressive to see that the other parts of his game, not centered around his knee, didn't seem to falter.
You saw Garrett Williams in that Sights and Sounds video really just jump off the bench when Kyler ripped off the 13-yard gain that covered closer to 70. And Garrett Williams told us a couple weeks ago in the Big Red Rage, we just said, how sore were you after your first action? Your first action in a year. He said, I was really sore that Monday morning. Like, I've never been sore before after a football game. So I'm guessing Kyler is experiencing a lot of the same, and it's still going to be a process, physically to get his body back. I know Dennis Gardeck, just looking at some of the interviews you guys did after the game, I wrote down his quote. Gardeck said, I have goosebumps because I know the feeling, meaning the rehab, coming back from an ACL, the hard work, the loneliness of doing that sort of rehab. So to hit it in stride as a winning quarterback, I have the utmost respect for Kyler Murray. The guys who have been there and done that know how remarkable that is. And to your point about Tyrann Mathieu, we talked about this earlier, is Tyrann came out at the beginning and was wearing a knee brace.
Yep.
And a lot of coaches looked at that and said, he's not back. Until he takes off the knee brace, he's not back mentally if he thinks he needs that knee brace. So I know Kyler was asked that a couple of times by the media leading up to that game, and he dismissed it immediately. But a lot of guys in that situation would have worn the knee brace.
Is it me, or I felt
yes.
like that's fair? Is it me though? I feel like every time Kyler's been asked about his knee and what he needs to do, like the brace is the one thing that really pops in my head, but there was a couple other things.
Like last week I asked him about the process of trusting the knee, and he said, if I didn't trust it, I wouldn't be out there.
But he also said, and I feel like he's done this multiple times, he basically says, look, if the doctors and Buddy say I'm okay, then I'm okay. Like, he knows if he feels good, but like in terms of like how he should believe in the knee, I like the idea that he's basically like, well, these are the guys that know, and if they know, then I should be fine. Like when you're talking about Tyrann needing the brace, my guess is a lot of that is in his own head, like I feel like I still need that. And I think Kyler must have got past that, or he's able to. We talk about trusting the knee. He trusts the professionals. Kyler did not stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, but
right,
maybe Buddy Morris did.
Yeah. But once again, the shout out to, the strength team, all the rehab, everyone who helped him with that, the surgeons, it's just remarkable. At least to me, I didn't expect him to be that aggressive, to be that athletic, to look like he did before. And then there's not only what Kyler does for the offense and does for this team, I think there's what the offense in this scheme does for Kyler. Once again, to put him in a complete offense, to put him, in a scheme where he was going through his reads and his progressions. Had a chance to talk with some of the coaches after the game, and they confirmed he was looking, one's not open, two's not open, there's three, boom, release. And there was a moment there early in the third quarter where they went up tempo and they caught Atlanta with the inability to sub. And so now the Cardinals had some different personnel that Atlanta didn't want out there. And if you go back and you look at the play-by-play, hit McBride twice. That was the one where Elijah Higgins dropped that ball right on the money.
That was painful.
But they had the matchups they wanted. So you're seeing the football IQ. Because to me, look, we know he can throw it. We know he can run it. We know he's accurate. He has the quick release. Does he have the ability to diagnose a defense, make the quick decision, find the open man? And we saw a lot of that. And to me, that's the only unknown about his career so far, is he was in a scheme that I'm not sure catered to that. At the very least, it was a non-traditional NFL offense. And so, okay, how much upside is left in Kyler as a quarterback? You restore the athleticism, what we saw, but now as a quarterback and a playmaker, a decision maker, how much upside is still left? That, to me, is the most intriguing part about the rest of this season.
I think that's fair. I also think we should note that part of the reason that I think there was success on Sunday and there would be success in the future is because of a running back like James Conner and being able to rely on the run game, how that is going to open up play action. I think even more so than it did with Josh Dobbs when he was here as the quarterback. I think it's interesting with Amari DiMercato hurt. Had James Conner not been ready to play, and if you had to rely on Keontae Ingram, who has struggled as that starting running back, struggled to consistently get positive yardage, how different would that game have looked? That's not something to harp on because that's not the case. That's hypothetical, right? I don't want to necessarily steer us in that direction. But I do think part of the reason that you saw success and you will continue to see it is because you have a running back like Connor who is able to handle the load, fight for those extra yards, and find those gaps and be that nitty-gritty bulldozing running back that you really need in this scheme.
We've talked about it before. It's obvious, but still, I again, question in the mailbag this week about how well Josh Dobbs has played in 2 games with the Vikings and what's the difference there compared to what was going on here. And my point was his numbers and what he's doing right now are very similar to that 3-week stretch that he had where they played the Giants, the Cowboys, and the 49ers. Even though 2 of those were losses, Josh Dobbs played very well. And then what happened in the game after the 49ers? It was the Bengals game, and it was the game where James Conner went out in the first half, and that's when it all got sideways on Josh Dobbs. So I would agree with you. I mean, as great as it was to see Kyler Murray, I do think it was a major, major thing to have James Conner back in the lineup, not only back in the lineup, but playing about the same amount of snaps percentage-wise, 70% of the snaps or so, getting 16 carries, didn't have a target passing-wise other than the 2-point out of nowhere kind of thing. But to have James Conner back doing James Conner things, just like you had Kyler Murray back doing Kyler Murray things, I think played a big role. And that's just like any team. You're going to need your good players to play to look better. And if you put Kyler in a situation where he doesn't have a running back or whatever, that's going to hurt some things. But other than a couple injuries on the offensive line, which aren't insignificant, he had all his skill guys.
Is now the proper time to give some love to tight end Trey McBride?
One last note on James Conner. Jonathan Gannon's TV show this week, I asked him, I said, how much does this team feed off the mentality, the mindset of a James Conner? He said, I feed off the mentality of James Conner. So it's a great line from Jonathan Gannon. Because after the game, how many people said, including Gannon, including like Matt Prater on the field, we just asked him, okay, what was it like playing with Kyler again? He said not only was it fun, but he can score at any time, but he gives this team a lot of hope. Gannon said he gives this team not only a jolt of energy, was his quote, but also belief. So there's that confidence. I mean, it's just different. When you go into a game with a franchise quarterback, you know you're in the game. Whereas if you go in with a backup quarterback and you're down a couple of scores, that belief might wane.
It was hard this weekend doing the radio show without Dani Sureck. And
that's right.
We brought in Zach Gershman, and it's just not the same. The belief just isn't quite there.
Yeah, you just
Good
knew.
answer, Darren.
You knew going in the ratings weren't going to be the same. It's just the way it was. You knew that going in. So, as for Trey McBride, oh my goodness, nobody is having more fun right now than Trey McBride. He literally smiling on the sideline, just waiting to get into the game. It's amazing. The before and after of Trey McBride, what he was last season, what he is this season. Heck, dare I say what he is, what he's become ever since Zach Ertz moved aside.
Well, this doesn't feel like a 2-week fluke from what we've seen from McBride. This really feels like you are watching somebody step into the type of player they are supposed to be in this league. McBride didn't have a lot of opportunities last year. That probably paired with the scheme. This staff really pushed him on his blocking ability to become a more full tight end. But the way that he has stepped up, I mean, it felt very similar to when Zach Ertz joined the Cardinals, and immediately, even Kyler called Ertz his security blanket out on the field, and that was what it felt like watching Kyler and McBride connect so consistently. And oh gosh, that catch by McBride that was short to go and reach it and grab it. It was, what an incredible performance.
I think to myself, the dude had 8 catches for 131 yards, and that includes the fact that he and Kyler weren't on the same page, and McBride probably should have sat down in the zone, which would have gotten him another catch and probably at least 10 more yards, maybe?
Sure.
8 yards. And then, which I've heard from enough people because they all hammered me on Twitter that the pass, Hollywood Brown was wide open in the end zone and Kyler just overthrew him. That was a good play. I get it. But from our angle, Trey McBride literally had nobody 10 yards around him, about 15 yards down the field on that play.
Wow. I didn't know that.
If he just throws it to Trey McBride instead of trying to go over the top. Now, again, I'm not saying Hollywood wasn't open or that wasn't the right play. But if he throws it to Trey McBride has another catch there for at least 20 or 25 yards. And they're obviously in the red zone. So one of the things that struck me not only how well McBride played, but again, with some of the things clicking with James Conner back in the lineup, with Kyler as your quarterback, all of a sudden the Drew Petzing scheme in terms of, there were a lot of open receivers a lot of the time. Now, the Falcons aren't the Browns in terms of a defense, but that was impressive. And I will say that last catch that you just marveled over, same thing. Trey McBride saying afterwards, he goes, it was short. At that point, I was just trying to get a pass interference. But for him to basically pull off the swim move and throw the guy out of the way so he could go catch it, and then making sure he did catch it, that was pretty impressive.
McBride was sitting at 98 receiving yards for a little too long and ended up being the first Cardinals tight end to surpass 100 yards in a game in some 34 years. Which, no, I was not alive. It's just...
Neither was he.
He was not. But he was sitting at 98 for a while. And I'm like,
I know.
There's no way he's not going to hit 100.
I had the tweet primed as soon as he got to 98, and then the interception happened, and nobody made note of this, but I think the bomb to him was the first target Kyler had to him since the interception. He was at 98 yards. They threw the pick. And then Kyler didn't throw it his way anymore. And I'm like, and that was in the third quarter. And I'm like, oh, come on. I want to use this tweet.
So here's the backstory on that. I asked Trey McBride about that catch specifically. It was our post-game radio guest in the locker room. And he said he went to Kyler before that drive. And he said, if this guy is over me in man coverage, I've been killing this guy all game. He said, just throw it up. That's what Kyler did. He saw him in man coverage. He threw it up, and he went after it and got it. Here's the other thing. Of his 8 catches, 7 were for first downs.
Yeah.
He had 40 yards after contact. We've been saying for 6 weeks now, dude does not go down on first contact.
Mark Bavaro-esque.
There you go.
Dani doesn't know who we're talking about. I got ripped on Twitter for saying that's way too old of a reference, but I don't care. Mark Bavaro, look it up.
That's right. Own it. It's and look, here's the other thing about his most impressive catch was probably what Lorenzo Alexander went into great detail about today on the Red Sea Report, the 7 route, which was in the sideline where he had to leap and stretch. The ball's going away from him towards the sideline, and he reeled that in just like a couple of games ago where he had that, what he thought was a drop, but it was a very difficult catch. He expected himself to make it, and they slammed his helmet down as he came to the sideline. I mean, he's very demanding of himself, Trey McBride.
I think that's the confidence of getting these opportunities. He's making the most of them. It will be interesting. Zach Ertz has one more game to miss, right? For IR? The minimum of 4 games, I believe.
Sounds right. Because it happened right before the trade deadline. So
right.
At least one more, yeah.
It'll be interesting to see, are the Cardinals going to ride the hot hand? Or what exactly are you going to do when Ertz is ready to return? But McBride has been playing out of his mind.
Come on, he's tight end too. Zach Ertz is tight end too.
Yeah,
I would agree.
I would think that if you were looking at how they were kind of deploying before Zach Ertz got hurt, where Ertz was TE1 and technically McBride was TE2, but you had Swaim as the main blocking tight end, I would just think that McBride and Ertz would basically flip-flop roles.
Well, here's the other question. It's similar to, I feel like, Hollywood Brown. I think that Brown, numbers-wise, would be having a much better season looking from the outside. He didn't have that connection with Dobbs for the first half of the season. Neither did Ertz. So are you going to try and give Ertz that opportunity now that Kyler's back to get out there and maybe, I don't want to say turn things around, but come and make more of an impact than he did the first half of the season?
I don't see you doing that with the expense of cutting down what McBride has right now. And McBride is a second-round pick. He's obviously much younger than Ertz. This is no slam on Zach Ertz, but Trey McBride's arrow is moving up, and obviously Zach Ertz is on the downside of his career. I think Zach Ertz can still help you if he gets back on the field, assuming he does, and I would think he would. That's what JG said before he got hurt, was basically he will be back. But right now, Trey McBride is showing you stuff that you're hoping to see from a second-round pick, and you want to build on that right now. Like, that's what the rest of the season is about. I know Gannon didn't want to talk about this being a new season now, and that's fine. But if we're going to talk about the season being as a whole, you're still talking about a 2-8 football team that, barring something unbelievable, is not going to make the postseason. I want to see some of these younger guys, the rookies and the second-year players, get that kind of time. I will say it's funny you mentioned Hollywood Brown because for me, I love the fact that Kyler was willing to continue to go to McBride because he was the open guy. I mean, Hollywood's his boy, and he still only, I think he targeted him 4 times. Now, one was a great throw for a 28-yard gain. The other one, Hollywood almost made Kyler look great because it was definitely overthrown, and Hollywood was running at, track speed to just get his fingertips on the ball, and it almost pulled off. But the fact that Kyler was willing to go to McBride more often and not necessarily force feed his friend, I think is an important thing.
I'd love to know the top speed from Hollywood on that. Like how fast was he going?
Next gen stats we got to know.
Golly, that was impressive.
Well, one last note on Trey McBride. I did ask Gannon in the absence of a question because I'm like, okay, what is the question about Trey McBride? And so I just threw out the stats: 8 for $131, first time since 1989. What do you have, Coach, in Trey McBride right now? And he said, you have a tight end 1. He didn't say the tight end 1. He said you have a tight end 1 in Trey McBride.
That's a good problem to have.
Exactly. So
look, there's going to be, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it on this podcast, there's, as we get to the end of the season, assuming the record doesn't get significantly better, there's going to be some of these debates and questions that are going to have to be discussed as you head into the stretch. Are you going to test some guys at different positions? Are you going to test some guys at different spots in the depth chart? And what does that mean for some of the veterans that may or may not be here next year?
Look,
don't worry, you two are safe.
Although, to what degree can you play the young guys anymore?
Well,
I mean,
that's
you talk about let the rooks cook. I mean, the entire rookie class now.
Disappointed you don't have your T-shirt yet, Paul.
Let's just go from the top. Paris Johnson Jr. starter day 1. B.J. Ojulari, 2 sacks, 8 tackles in this game. So the guy who supposedly was suspect in run defense had 8 tackles.
Highest graded rookie PFF player for the week.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, didn't see that.
The Cardinals had 3 of top 10.
Top 10, yeah.
Wow. Garrett Williams, was he one of those?
He was.
He was? Okay. And then Michael Wilson, who easily could have had a touchdown, obviously.
Kyler very disappointed.
So, I mean, your top 4 picks in the first 3 rounds are all absolute keepers at this point. And then once you go past John Gaines, who had the season-ending injury, I mean, each one of the remaining 4 has played a role. Clayton Tune, Owen Papo, no one talks about him, but he's on all the special teams.
Tune had his first touchdown.
Yep. And then, by the way, Kyler had a big old smile on his face. Did they show that on TV? He had a big smile on his face when Clayton Tune checked in to take it that last yard across the goal line. So like, okay, I get it. So that smile, and I'm like, of course, that's the business of football. You got a 5th-round rookie on a rookie contract. You're going to put him at the center of the fray, not you coming off with your $230 million contract.
He's also a little bit bigger than Kyler, so there's that.
There's that. And then, of course, the last 2, Keitrell Clark, who was dressed.
Played special teams.
Yep. Bobby Price was out, obviously. And then Dante Stills, who
the other one in the top 10.
Yep.
Easily could have had a sack that Gardak ended up with. Stills was really bummed. He had Taylor Heineke for a hot moment.
I think Ojulari's grade was like 83.9. Stills was over 80 for PFF.
Wow.
Now, again, you can take PFF grades for what they are.
Sure.
But when you're getting that kind of production out of a 6th-round pick, pretty nice.
And then the undrafted rookie running back, Amari DiMercato, before the toe injury. I mean, he looked good. I mean, he definitely, if he was healthy, there's no doubt he would be the number 2 in the 1-2 punch of running backs.
I'm disappointed you didn't say more about him in training camp, Paul. I mean,
That's
yeah,
right.
Good job, Paul.
You're right. You know what? Little flex on camera here. Let's see. The Paulie Pigskin breakout player at camp on offense was Amari DiMercato.
What player?
And on defense was Dante Stills.
Are you going to pretend like you had one player?
Because of constant noise and pressure from the outside, we did whittle it down to an offensive and defensive player.
When did we do this? What happened to the other 6 on your list, Paul?
As we move it along quickly and segue to the defense, speaking of Dante Stills,
Yes.
how about a defense that did make second-half adjustments? I'll say that much. For example, on the 4th-and-1 stop, that supposedly was a call they put in at halftime. If we get this stinking look again from Atlanta, we're going to do this in response. Atlanta did it on the 4th-and-1, and then the Cardinals stoned it.
Ritter did slip a little bit. He did.
Yeah,
just a little.
The turf monster did get him a little bit. Yes, a little bit. There's no doubt. But still,
we make no apologies here, Paul.
Atlanta ran it 41 times. They threw it 21 times. But in the third quarter, they had negative -2 yards. I mean, it's like shades of Todd Bowles. Remember Todd Bowles was?
I remember Todd Bowles.
Was famous for his halftime adjustments, and so that was like the best set of halftime adjustments maybe we've seen all year. Honestly,
it was impressive, and you did what you had to do to contain a run-first Falcons offense. I know that going into the game, Atlanta, not the most threatening offense or team, but still balanced. I mean, they had put up 100 rushing yards in 7 of 9 games. Of their 33 explosive plays of 20 more yards, like 27 of those came in the air. So they were able to get teams both ways, but the Cardinals were able to contain them.
I don't know what sort of grade that Budda Baker received. Not that he really needs to pay any attention at this point in his career to PFF, but the fact he made a couple of open field tackles against Bijan Robinson, those were remarkable. You can count on one hand how many defenders tackle Bijan Robinson in space in the open field like Budda Baker did.
I will say that seeing Bijan Robinson live, he's the real deal, isn't he?
Oh, yeah. I mean, his acceleration and the jump cuts, just athleticism, the explosion, him getting through the line of scrimmage, just sort of hesitating. And that's what Dante Stoles told us in the Big Red Rage, because he went against him 4 years in a row, West Virginia against Texas, that he has this unbelievable blend of patience and acceleration. He'll look, and then boom, he stokes it, and he's by you. It's just, and he said in Atlanta's scheme, he actually was as aggressive as he's ever seen a Bijan Robinson on Atlanta film. So how he came in with less carries than Tyler Algier I didn't understand that.
We'll have to check out
so
Falcons Underground for that.
Yeah, the way
true.
the Falcons utilize a lot of their offensive pieces, interesting.
By the way, C.J. Stroud, is that our segue to C.J. Stroud and the assignment at hand?
It can be, Paul. Would you like it to be?
Are you going to say something to Houston and remind them that we have their first pick and, maybe go easy on us and the other teams the rest of the year?
So that would be about pick number 20 right now because they're the 7th seed in the playoff race right now.
It is 20. Wow. Right now, after this past weekend, I think Cardinals are sitting at 3 and the Houston's at 20. And I don't know where Houston goes from here. I do strongly feel like the Cardinals aren't going to be a top 3 pick when this is all said and done.
Totally agree. Carolina, Giants, in New England. And that Carolina pick, of course, goes to the Bears. That goes to the Bears.
I think there's a chance we pass up.
Yeah. It's so, yeah. The question is now, is it going to even be a top 5 pick? The way some of these, the way the Cardinals are trending and the way some of these other teams are trending?
Yes.
With 8 games to go?
Yes, correct.
7 games to go.
It's hard to believe it's only 7 games.
But you know what? Can I just say this too?
You can say whatever you want.
Because driving home and listening to some of the post-game calls.
Well, that's your first mistake.
And in the face of a victory and griping and grousing about your draft selection, okay? Have we not all learned it's not nearly as much about where you draft as is who's doing the drafting? Can we all agree on that? Now, if you need a franchise quarterback and you get the number 1 pick, I get it. There was one Kyler Murray that year. There's one, but even a Patrick Mahomes went number 12.
Yes.
So, or was that Deshaun Watson? Then Mahomes went 10 and Deshaun Watson went 12. Whatever. That was the year Mitchell Trubisky went number 2.
Also, we've learned Monty Ossenfort has no problem, making trades and
we can trade up
and being busy.
Down.
So it's too early to know.
I don't think this team is going to be looking at a quarterback. I think they're not going to because of where they're going to be drafting, and I don't think they're going to be because you paid your guy and he's going to play pretty well, and now you use all this ammunition to build around.
But
him.
it would be nicer if Houston could help us out a little bit more than what they've been doing.
And the year on a losing streak all the way, sure.
The Texans already have more wins than they had all of last season. They have their most wins since they were a 10-win team in 2019, although they haven't had a 3-game winning streak since 2018.
The Cardinals always play, and they don't go there very often, but the Cardinals always play kind of yucky in Houston, though.
Well, Houston is yucky. Oh, that's going to be in the open, isn't it?
Wow.
Oh, man.
Wow.
There it is.
Okay.
I stand by. I will say this. If you're from Dallas, you don't like Houston. If you're from Houston, you don't like Dallas. So it's not just me.
Yeah, that scouting report on Houston there, Dani, would be like if we asked Darren about Tucson.
This is fair. Sorry, all you Tucsonites out there. Sorry to my brother who lives down there.
So what you what you do if you're the Cardinals is you build up C.J. Stroud all week long, right? Like Nick Rawlis meeting the media and saying I'd heard the noise about C.J. Stroud, and I looked at the film, and it was legit. It was legit. He's a legit MVP candidate.
I was going to say
you layer it on. I mean, you really lambaste him with praise, right?
What does it matter what the Cardinals say? Literally every national talk show is talking about him being an MVP candidate. You don't have to do anything here, and everybody else nationally is talking about how C.J. Stroud should be in the MVP talk and that kind of stuff. I don't think the Cardinals really have to really go out of their way.
Well, because I was actually going to contribute. I was going to pile on with the praise, Darren. I was going to mention how, the only quarterbacks in NFL history to lead the NFL through 10 weeks of a season in both passing yards per game and touchdown interception ratio are the following: Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, and C.J. Stroud.
Wait, back up. What's the
Through 10 weeks of a season.
Through 10 weeks of the season.
Only 4 quarterbacks have led the NFL simultaneously in passing yards per game and touchdown interception ratio.
Okay.
Because he has 15 touchdowns and 2 picks to lead
not
the
a
NFL.
rookie, just any
quarterback.
Okay.
And
that's a nice list.
There are 4. Peyton did it 1 year, Brady did it 1 year, Mahomes did it 1 year, C.J. Stroud. Hello, right?
Yeah, but has he seen Victor Dimukeji yet? He has not.
I mean, more praise. 2 weeks ago, he set single-game rookie records, all-time records with 470 yards passing and 5 touchdowns against Tampa, right? The last rookie quarterback, Darren, to lead the NFL in passing yards per game for a whole season, Davey O'Brien, 1939. They named an award after that.
I know Davey O'Brien. I don't know him personally, but I know of him.
So, and
Dani doesn't, but I do.
His last 2 games, by the way, he's led 2 game-winning drives, which is some sort of other record.
C.J. Stroud.
Get back. We're back to reality. Back to 2023.
I didn't know you were around in 1939.
He went to Cincinnati and on to Cincinnati, and he got the win against Joe Burrow, and then same with the week before against Tampa. 2 different games, 2 different ways. 39-37 the week before. There you go, C.J. Stroud in Houston. And he did it last week without his number 1 receiver and his number 1 running back. So you got to – and then D'Amico Ryan's obviously known for the defense and the scheme, and they seemingly have solidified their offensive line. That was the word out of Houston. I mean, once again, if you're going to talk about the Cardinals between here and now and then going into the offseason, to me, beyond Kyler, is that offensive line. Okay, how much more needs to be done? Like, if you look at the Lions right now and their turnaround, I think the underrated part of that Lions rebuild has been the offensive line. They have a top 5 offensive line in the NFL.
If you had to ask me right now, let's say the Cardinals did end up with a 3rd overall pick and didn't trade it, and you had asked me right now what position that would be spent on, it would not be Marvin Harrison Jr., and it would not be a quarterback. It would be an offensive lineman.
I agree.
I think Monty Ossenfort is going to look hard on the 2 lines, and that's where the premium first-round picks are going to go, and that's where this team is going to build. And some fans are going to get disappointed, and it's possible. We'll see where they're picking. It's possible they pass up on a Marvin Harrison to make a pick like that, but I think that is where the focus is going to be.
What about D-line? What if there's a Nick Bosa, Myles Garrett?
Very possible.
I think in the trenches is going to be a top priority of – if depending on, are you going to end up still with 2 first-round picks, or are you going to use, you're going to package some things away and drop back or look ahead in the future, whatever that might be. I think offensive and defensive linemen are going to be a top priority.
Yep.
The guy 2 weeks in a row has gotten a big shout out. He just brought him up on his own on the TV side. Jonathan Gannon shouted out Kevin Strong Jr. 2 weeks in a row, said he graded out really high.
I've been impressed with what Nick Rallis has done on defense and what they have done defensively, considering what you would probably consider a lack of defensive linemen, especially. Like, they've gotten past it with try-hard guys, and that's I hope they're not upset if they ever hear that, which they won't. They won't listen to this. But Kevin Strong has had his moments. Lecky Fotu, Jonathan Ledbetter.
We saw a lot of good things out of Carlos Watkins and LJ Collier before they got hurt.
Even Roy Lopez was all over the field.
I mean, they've done nice jobs with how they're teaching these guys to play. And that's why it'd be nice to have a defensive line like the Eagles, and that's the ultimate goal. But if you can get 1 or 2 guys on the defensive line to stoke up some of these other guys that they have, you're going to make a big step forward.
And you're getting enough with the pass rushers. Now, is it a lot? No. Is it top of the league? No. But I think you're getting more than we all probably expected.
I would agree with that. For me, you either need to upgrade the pass rush a little bit more, or you got to upgrade the cornerback coverage a little bit more to really balance to where you need it. Because I think you need. It was funny. I asked Nick Rollis this week about if you had an elite pass rusher, because they've been so big on rotating the outside linebackers. If you had an elite pass rusher, how would you approach it? And he insisted that the rotation would continue to happen that way, even if I had an elite guy. Now, if I've got an elite edge guy, I don't know if I love rotating him out a ton.
What if Nick Rollis had, wait for it, Will Anderson Jr.? What if the Cardinals had stayed at number 3 and selected Will Anderson? Do you think he'd really be in a rotation with 5 other guys?
Well, here's the next level of that question.
Okay.
Is one of the reasons they didn't take Will Anderson is because their philosophy is such that they don't necessarily are looking for an elite outside guy, because they're going to rotate him a bunch anyways. You might want an elite inside guy, but maybe they're not going to look or spend a real high. If you find a guy in the 3rd round, great, but they may not look for an elite edge guy if that's how they look at it.
And you know what? I agree with you. O-line, D-line, corner, I think those would be, the positions you'd consider seriously in the top 5, top 10 of the draft. But once again, on D-line, if you took the Eagles or you took the 49ers and you just took their D-line room with the Cardinals D-line room and you put them into a draft, how many Eagles and 49ers D linemen would be selected before you take a single Cardinals defensive lineman? Just to illustrate the point that they're doing more with less than maybe any team in the league when it comes to D-line.
Yeah, it's been impressive what they've been able to do. And I think really the last couple of games, I mean, think of how many games halftime adjustments were being made against the Cardinals to run the ball. I think of the Rams game. They came out and they ran the ball 8 or 9 straight times. They had like 20 rushing yards in the first half and ended up, I don't know, probably close to 150 or something ridiculous. And that hasn't really been a problem the last couple of weeks.
Well, it wasn't the Cleveland
we're
game.
Not
wasn't
counting.
great.
We're not counting Cleveland.
I will say this. I do think, circling all the way back to Kyler, that's also going to make a difference. Like when the Rams got it going running the ball, part of the issue was the Cardinals offense disappeared in the second half. If you've got a Kyler running an offense where you can stay on the field, where you can keep that defense rested a little bit, then that helps. I think the talent thing really shows when they're out there even more. But if you can keep them rested and then you're rotating them, I think you've got a chance to make some good things happen. It's
been impressive the way somebody like Dennis Gardeck, who has been more of that utility player the last couple of years, to come in and make such a splash. One of the leaders in that room of leading the charge, and he now has the most sacks by an undrafted rookie for the Cardinals, which says a lot about his hard work.
He kind of took that personal, by the way, when he was asked that question in his locker after the game. He's like, yeah, I'm trying to get rid of that qualifier. I just want the most sacks. Not by an undrafted guy. I just want the most sacks. Like, he's tired of hearing every one of his stats kind of comes with the qualifier, as an undrafted player, ... But look, when you come out, speaking of the Cleveland game, right, the week after the Cleveland game.
We forgot about that,
what
Paul.
Cleveland game?
You had more total net yards on the first drive with Kyler. You had the entire game the week before.
Technically, it was the second drive. They went 3-0 the first drive, but we know what you mean.
Okay,
Darren.
The rising tide that lifts all players, I guess, is what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
And so, let's face it, the Cardinals minus Kyler, in between the injury and his return, they were 1-13 with Colt McCoy, David Blau, Trace McSorley.
Forgot about Trace McSorley.
Josh Dobbs and Clayton Tune. So here's the last question I'll have. He was under center 9 times by whoever calculated that up. I tried to get Ron Wolfley to apologize to all his Basinonians for under-delivering on his promise of having Kyler under center in this scheme. Was there any level of disappointment and or surprise from the number of times he was under center?
No, for me it wasn't disappointment. Again, this was something else I addressed in the mailbag. For me, I want to see him under center more, and that was more than he used to do with Cliff Kingsbury. Not a ton more. 9 is 9, but it was still more. And if you can execute an offense where you have that in the playbook that you're going to once in a while or a little bit more than once in a while, and you can do the other things you want to do out of the shotgun, and it's still fooling the defense. I don't care if he's in the shotgun. They ran a couple play actions out of shotgun. In fact, I think the 28-yard pass to Hollywood Brown was a shotgun play action, and it got him open. I mean, I don't care how it's executed. It just needs to be executed. And I would hazard a guess if Cliff Kingsbury had put Kyler Murray under center 9 times or half the time, and you were still having the same offensive results, there wouldn't be all these fans going, why isn't he not under center? The reason they were struggling before wasn't primarily because he was in shotgun. Let's get that straight right now.
Well, like I told Wolf, I really don't care necessarily. I just want James Conner downhill.
Yes,
I just want James Conner with a head of steam. That's what I want. So
Wolf just
if you want to put him in the pistol
football
or whatever, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, you can spread everyone out. Just give me James Conner downhill. By the way, I lied. Here's the last question I want to throw out there. This is from Roy Jetstream Green, all right, the great one himself. His name's on the building, so we give him the floor with the following rant. He wanted to know at the end of the game why it made more sense to line up a game-winning field goal, a walk-off field goal, versus scoring the touchdown with maybe 30 seconds to go after you get Atlanta to use their last timeout. Why not score the surefire touchdown, forcing them to score a touchdown with 30 seconds or less on the clock and forcing them to go hold the whole length of the field? Why is it less risky or more surefire of a bet to line up a game-winning chip shot when you've already had at least one incident this year with, a holder who's new to the job?
It's a fair question. I do think it's a fair question. I will say this. I don't have the analytics. I don't have the stats. I'm willing to bet a large amount of money that however microscopic the chances, if you give the Falcons the ball at the 25-yard line with 30 seconds left needing a touchdown, I would guess that is still a greater percentage of a touchdown happening there than you failing to make a 22-yard field goal. That is what my guess is. So then you say to yourself, let's just run down the clock. If they can't get the ball at all, they can't score. Now, you're not wrong. And even Jeff Rodgers acknowledged to us that things happen.
Because it's one thing to do it when it's a tie game, and at least you have the safety net of overtime. But when you're trailing,
you're right,
and that gets screwed up, you lose.
There's a fantastic, and funny things happen this weekend. Just ask the Bills on stupid losses. But
that's right.
It's funny because I'm going to do a blog post on this very subject, and I found this picture by not by Caitlin Epps, but actually by Pete Vanderstop, another one of our photographers. And it's the picture after the 6-yard run from the 7 where Connor's trying to go down. And the picture is of like Connor midway through dropping to the ground. And you can see the Falcons defender desperately trying to push him towards the goal line because they're trying to push him into the end zone so that they did get a chance to get the ball back.
Yeah, I like that. It's almost like, oh, man, but then you're like, oh, that takes a lot, I feel like, from the player of you really see that team mentality of they're not going to go and get the touchdown and get the stat for themselves and put the points on the board. Like, James knew what the right decision was from the team standpoint, and he did that.
The other amazing part is right after the game, on a big victory like that, last-second victory, sometimes we get clearance to do an immediate on-field interview. So we grabbed Matt Prater, and we did 3 questions on the air 90 seconds after his game-winning field goal. Okay, great. Next day, had to interview him on the radio side when I was carrying Wolfskeister for 4 hours on his own show. He comes on, I reference the interview, and we get a 0 answer. Like, he's like, what? Huh? He had no idea what I was talking about. He said he had no recollection of that interview on the field, and that quite often he'll black out like after something like that.
Oh, so this isn't about
so it's
you
not
being,
personal.
Yeah,
well, I don't know whether to take it personal or not. I mean, there's definitely that chance I should take it personal. I'm not exactly certain, but and then you look at his track record. I didn't realize this until they put out the notes. He's 17 for 17 all-time in career game-winning field goals.
Sheesh.
So he must go into another zone maybe mentally to be so automatic.
I mean, going back to your original question on this segment, I'm like, I mean, you're right. They haven't had the perfect holds, and that there's got to be some nerves there between the holder and the snapper. I think Prater was probably just fine. Now this is a 22-yard. If it's there, I'm gonna make this. But like the rest of it, it would have been interesting. And somebody made the point, and I would tend to agree with this. It's not like Patrick Mahomes is on the other side. It's not like it was Tom Brady. It was Desmond Ridder. Like there's a difference there between like who you're giving that last 25 seconds to.
Yep. And by the way, you can always tell on the sideline just how equipped the kicker is in that moment. I shared this story. I forget how long ago this was, but there was a kicker who knew the game-winning attempt was coming up, and you could just tell on that kicker's face he was gripping.
I'm afraid I know who you're talking about.
And the pressure was mounting. And there it was.
Actually, I might know a couple of them.
A 40-something yard game-winning field goal attempt with 3 seconds left on the clock. Cardinals use their last timeout. They call his name, get out there. He goes running out to the field. Get back here! You forgot your helmet.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
And it didn't go well. That was an early indicator that, it was, So it got sideways. Cardinals end up losing. But you knew from the moment he crossed the white stripe without his helmet that maybe the moment was a little too big for him. A little bit.
No bueno.
Okay, there you go. This, just another reason to appreciate your kicker. So, I hope there's praise and only praise for Matt Prater in the mailbag.
Machine. He's a machine.
He's a machine. There you go. That'll do it for this edition of Cardinals Underground, brought to you by Pacific Office Automation.